18.
The initial crime scene, because of the number of victims involved and other factors, was one of the most complicated that I've seen in my career. And that was a factor in the need to submit multiple submissions to FDLE, and it was a factor in the amount of time that it took to process the scene, which, as the sheriff indicated, was several days.
It's a death penalty case. Donald Hartung on trial for the murder of his mother and his two half-brothers. Jury selection is continuing, and neither side has spoken publicly that much about this case at the courthouse, okay? They're not really, we haven't been privy to a lot of the details. What we've been told from prosecutors is, hey, wait for the opening statements. So those opening statements will be coming up soon. In the meantime, though, that's not going to stop us. So we're digging through some of the documents. Came across one of the search warrants. I wanted to share that with you. So they executed a search warrant. Here's some of the things they were looking for. Some of it pretty normal. Electronics, right? It's 2020. Electronics have a lot to do with this. Laptops, computers. Clothing, possibly worn by the suspect. Narcotics, did that have a role in this whole thing? Firearms. One of the victims was shot. Any all gun parts and accessories, got that. Any paperwork associated with the residence, you know, the occupancy. DNA. You got to track down the DNA when you do a search warrant. Vehicle keys, right? Okay, that might have something to do with how someone got there, how they left. Wicca pagan evidence. Wicca pagan evidence. Ha. All right, so why on a search warrant do you have a line for gather up all the Wicca pagan evidence you see at the scene? Well, one of the reasons is, I'm going to read that to you, part of an affidavit from one of the investigators who said on July 31st, 2015, during a consented search of Donald Hartung's residence, Investigator Jackson and I located a room inside Donald Hartung's residence designed for worship. Donald Hartung advised he is Wicca pagan. I researched Wicca pagan rituals where certain spells performed have items used that would be present on the table set up for worship. There's also a correlation with a ritual of prosperity that falls on July 31st, along with the blue moon rituals that occur every 3 years. This year, the blue moon is on July 31st. Okay, so there's some sort of a connection here. And when the sheriff came out before this case was solved in his press conference, he said, oh yeah, this is witchcraft. Okay, this is witchcraft. And it looked like a ritualistic killing. Let me bring back in my think tank on this issue. There's a lot to talk about, but let's start with this, just this whole thing, this sort of hovering over the trial. Wicca, paganism, witchcraft. It's being conflated, right, by investigators, prosecutors, and everyone else involved. I know they're different, but how does that impact this trial?
It's going to be huge. And depending on how all this evidence comes out, I mean, I mainly only do appellate work now, and the first thing that came to my mind was they better be real careful when you're prosecuting this case, because if they take this evidence when it's not directly tied to the crime, and they only use it to make him look like some sort of outlier.
Someone
right.
who's way different than the rest of us.
To prejudice him, right, against his character, they are going to get a reversal on this conviction. So they better be real careful. The Supreme Court is real funny about that. If it's religious, and pagan is going to be a protected religion, if it's religious and there's no tie, like they can't actually say he was, you know, doing some sort of, you know.
Well, let me tell you some more. Jailhouse
Yes.
informant is going to testify, and he's going to say that Donald Hartung told him that he went forward with the murders because of his Ouija board.
The snitch is going to say whatever it takes to save the snitch. I'm not shocked. I mean, he hears a great story, he's going to tell a great story. And it doesn't have to be necessarily the truth. So what he's saying isn't necessarily what happened. You know, if he hears about this Wiccan religion and, you know, the crazy facts about this case, it's entirely possible that he does spin a tale to help save himself. And it's hard to tell when it is a jailhouse snitch what's true and what's false.
Jailhouse informant, please. Can we use the proper term?
I'm going to stick to snitch.
Snitches and the stitches.
Ouija boards, paganism, right. The sheriff saying witchcraft.
Right. Well, let's go back to the search warrant. So the investigators, they search his home, they find a worship room. It has about Pagan and Wiggin. I don't know if those officers or detectives knew anything more about that religion than I do now.
Did some research.
Wikipedia? Where'd they get this from?
Yeah, we did it on we did the Wicca research on Wikipedia last night, but he said he researched Wicca pagan rituals.
Right. So he looks on Wikipedia, and anyone could have posted what that religion's about a ritual of killing and bludgeoning people, and then you put that in a search warrant. This is paramount character evidence. Yes. I have to agree that this is...
Hey, well, we did our own research. Gwendolyn Reese, who's a contemporary paganism expert, spoke to Seema Iyer. Take a listen.
Contemporary paganism is kind of an umbrella term that includes a number of different traditions, and Wicca is the largest of those traditions. Contemporary paganism is a group of religious traditions that take inspiration from the pre-Christian, mostly European traditions. They are not institutional, and there is no specific doctrine that is required for people to believe. So therefore, there can be a wide variety of beliefs. However, some of the very common beliefs would include being polytheistic or pantheistic, being nature reverencing, honoring the divine feminine as well as divine masculine, and things such as belief frequently in reincarnation, the ability for people to continue to grow and evolve in their spiritual practice, as well as things such as belief in magic and belief in building appropriate, healthy relationships with spirits of a variety of types, including ancestors and nature spirits, as examples.
Marie Napoli is with us in our CourtTV studios in New York City. Marie, does the jury need an expert like Gwendolyn Reese to come in and explain all of this?
I think it would be helpful for a jury to have an expert, but you were discussing whether or not this evidence would come in as character. But even if it is character evidence, it's allowed in if it proves motive. And if he had a motive to sacrifice his family members for his religion, that would be something that would be very relevant to bring in. Although this also makes it a very interesting case, a sexy case for the prosecutors to try, I think the real case really is about the money.
The money,
in the end, it all goes back to the money.
Yeah, I mean, the other part of this case is he was cut out of the will in 2012. And then he waited for the Ouija board, according to the jailhouse informant, to tell him when to go forward with the murder, because he had to kill his mother and his two half-brothers in order to be entitled to the money.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what do you think here? What do you think is going to happen?
It's religious persecution. There's no to take out a warrant based on someone's religious beliefs, and just because there might be some, story.
The blue moon.
This happened 3 days before that. It didn't happen on the... If you're going to do it, you should do it on the blue moon.
It was a gibbous blue moon. It wasn't a full blue moon.
They took the warrant out based on his religious beliefs. And look, if he was a Christian, if he was a Jew, if he was...
It would be a problem, right?
Of course it would. There are plenty of horrific examples of sexual and violent acts all throughout both Old Testament and New Testament. You don't see anybody persecuted or warrants taken out just because they're a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim or anything like that.
Or they have a room where they have Bible and prayer.
It was a prayer altar. There wasn't bodies hanging from it.
And that's my issue. Like I said, they will get reversed. It's absolutely no doubt in my mind if they don't tread carefully. As a prosecutor, you are not going to go forward and prosecute somebody claiming Wicca, pagan, whatever it is you want to say that they were doing, unless it ties to the murder. Him worshiping pagan or Satan is considered religious under the Supreme Court, right? So that is protected. So unless they've tied this in, meaning he did it, and there was something tied into him actually killing his family or their money, there's no way they can get away with this. And they are treading dangerous water here. But I haven't heard what the evidence is, right? So
let's talk about the jury selection, Ben.
Right.
How does this issue come up, or what do you want to find out about these jurors? And Do you want religious jurors? Do you want non-religious jurors? Who does the defense want?
Right. So if you're doing proper voir dire, I think, and you believe that the judge is going to allow the state to go into this, you have to ask them about their religious preferences. How do they feel about people who aren't of the same faith as them? Then as far as a prospective juror, you want somebody maybe that's a little agnostic, maybe someone who's not necessarily so committed to a certain religion that they view others' beliefs differently. That is what I would want, somebody who could be able to hear that and maybe dispel any connotations that are associated with it. Oh, this guy's a weirdo, so because he doesn't believe like I do, or he has different beliefs, then necessarily he might be guilty of this particular crime. Or it makes it easier for you to associate guilt because he's in a different group. So I would want someone who could maybe look at that and not necessarily be caught up in the fact that, wow, this dude is a devil worshiper, or whatever phrase.
Could that fact perhaps help him in the penalty phase if he's convicted?
You mean just because they sort of singled him out for his religious beliefs?
No, the fact that if in fact prosecutors can tie this to some sort of demented religious interpretation of Wicca or paganism, that it could perhaps be a mitigating factor to what's going on up here. Because we spoke with Gwendolyn Reese, and there are no sacrifices in Wicca.
I mean, they better be careful in that regard then, because are they then saying that he's not even competent to stand trial? So
I'm saying that's what the defense might argue.
Well, that's
they've tried, and he's found competent.
Right, so they're not going to argue that then.
Some level of mitigation to get him from death row to life without parole.
I'm not sure what.
If we get there.
I don't think they're going to use any kind of competency
It's
for
not an
that.
aggravating factor, that's for certain.
Right, I'm saying mitigating.
I mean, I think you could roll it in as a mitigation factor.
All right. We shall see. Jury selection continuing in that one. Meanwhile, speaking